Turn with me to Philippians. We're still there. Philippians chapter 2. I am sure if I surveyed our folks here, you've probably have some really interesting stories of when you've had opportunities to work or serve with someone in the church. You've probably had those experiences where you've like, oh, it was the best of times. And then you've had others saying, oh, I don't ever want to serve with them again. And you've had experiences between. Sometimes serving in the church can have some interesting outflows and outproducts. Because guess what? We're all different. There are so many different personalities in the people that are in the church. So sometimes those personalities don't work very well together. Matter of fact, I was reminded of a story of a couple. Imagine they weren't couples, it was a man and a woman. But they were asked to be co-chairs of a committee for a very special event that was going to happen at the church. And the guy was like, he did not want to co-chair with this particular woman. She said, if I tell her anything, the whole town is going to know what I said. Well, she was pretty quick to kind of quip back to him and says, listen, by the time any guy tells me what to do, the whole town will already know what has to be done. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that. There was a teacher, maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum. She was talking to some little kids about helping at home. So she asked them, well, what do you do to help around at home? So a couple of the kids, one said, well, I sweep the floor. The other said, I take out the trash. Another says, I help with the dishes. I dry the dishes. Well, there was this one particular little boy that was in the corner of the room, being very quiet, almost to the point of trying not to make eye contact. So the teacher was like, looked at him and she says, son, what do you do at home to help? He says, I stay out of the way. Perhaps we find ourselves in various degrees of serving, whether we find folks that we just don't serve well with or others that we enjoy, or some of us may think, I really don't want to serve because I probably make more of a mess than I would to help, in variations. But as a church, we have necessities to be of service. Again, we have a lot of different personalities here. There's so much to be done, and so there's so many folks that are needed to do it. And so the question may come, how best can we serve? Is there a particular blueprint? Is there a particular step-by-step guide to help us know how to serve? And I think as we get here in Philippians, Paul hits on some characteristics that he sees and mentions about Timothy that I think are perfect for us, giving us some characteristics that we can look to incorporate in our own lives to help us understand how best to serve. And now that I think about it, I don't have my clicker. It's still back there charging. So I'm going to come back there. I'll come back and get it. So you've got me. We're going to start reading in Philippians chapter 2. We're going to start with verse 19. I appreciate it. We're going to start with verse 19. So read with me. It says, now I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, so that I also may be encouraged when I hear news about you. For I have no one else like-minded who will genuinely care about your interests. All seek their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know his proven character, because he has served with me in the gospel ministry like a son with a father. Now, in these verses, Paul mentions several characteristics, again, of Timothy that are very helpful for us, understanding how best we can serve in the church. And the first one we find in verse 20, the very first part of that verse, where Paul writes, for I have no one else who is like-minded. See, the first characteristic that we must have if we are to serve in the church is to have the same mind. Now, Paul had kind of mentioned this earlier in his writings in Philippians about having the same mind, that mind of Christ. And so we must have that. Now, the relationship between Paul and Timothy was as close as one you could ever get, potentially one as a father and a son. Back in Timothy's hometown, Paul and Silas came through, and when Paul saw Timothy, he was like, I want him. Matter of fact, in Acts 16:3, Paul says he wanted Timothy to go with him. There was something about Timothy that drew Paul to himself. And I think part of that had to do with Timothy's mother and grandmother, how they were to teach him in the faith, how he matured from that. But there was something about Timothy. And so Timothy went with Paul on his journey where he would be mentored by Paul. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at Paul's encouragement to the believers at Philippi, again, to have that attitude, that same mind of Christ. And again, at the beginning of chapter 2, where Paul wrote about Jesus himself setting that example for us. Now, Paul urged, if we were to look at 1 Corinthians 4 and 1 Corinthians 11, he was encouraging followers to imitate himself, not out of, hey, I'm better than you, but he was saying, I am imitating Christ, so imitate me. So I'm convinced that Paul is identifying Timothy as not only being like-minded with himself, but one who is like-minded with Christ. And I'm thinking this is a huge recommendation, a great commendation that Paul would be giving this to Timothy. It really shows that Timothy has grown in his faith since Paul first set eyes on him in Timothy's own home. Now again, Timothy learned well from his mother and grandmother, but through his mentorship and travels with Paul, he has gained so much more maturity. Now, it is important, if not essential, that our service in the church have this foundation. Now, I didn't ask Leo earlier, but I can probably almost point to him that if you're going to go build a house, you might want to have a good foundation. How long do you spend on the foundation before you start the house? I'm just curious.
Usually a week.
Usually a week. What usually goes into the foundation?
Rebar and concrete.
Do you ever change? You ever say, I don't have enough rebar, so we'll just go with what we got?
Well, I was born my own, but they better not.
So there is a standard. You know from tried instances or learning from others' mistakes what's necessary for the solid foundation, because your homes depend on it. Your name is at stake if you don't have the good foundation. So Paul understands the importance of having a strong... Matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 7, he makes that inference talking about building a sure, solid foundation of our lives and the examples of what not to build it on. I mean, you wouldn't probably have a good reputation if all you built your houses on was wet sand. It would not be a good one. But Jesus said, build it on the rock, something solid, something that will stand the test of time. And so Paul understood that. We have to understand too that our foundation, what is our foundation? Our foundation is Jesus Christ. He is the why of everything that we do. And if we don't understand and comprehend the why, then anything else that we do will not hold water. Because when you start to do something and you will become weak, you'll become distracted, and you won't do it well because you don't have understanding of your why. Now, Tanya and I were watching some videos the other night. Michael Jr., don't know if you know him or not, but he happened to be mentioning this very topic, and I figured I'd show you a little bit about what he was talking about.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Was blind, but now I see.
Okay. Here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
We can serve in this church all day long. But if we don't understand our why, if we don't understand the impact that Christ has made in our lives, then we're just going to go through the motions. It won't mean anything. There won't be passion behind it. The kids will know the difference. We must understand our why. When we serve here in God's house, we must have that common foundation of our mind and attitude of Christ, our why. And if we can get it right, if we can understand that and imitate that in our lives day in and day out, then the how, all of the wheres and the whens, all those other details, all of that will be more impactful for Christ because our why is clearly defined. The first thing that Paul saw was that of the same mind. The second thing that Paul saw is we find in that verse 20 again and 21. It says, "For I have no one else like-minded who will genuinely care about your interest. All seek their own interest, not those of Jesus Christ." See, the thing here that Paul sees is that Timothy is genuine. He's being genuine. It's an important and a valuable trait that he sees here with Timothy. Now, in the King James, the word that they use for genuine is naturally. But in that word, it means genuinely with sincere solitude. See, the genuineness of Timothy is displayed in how he places others' interests above his own. His interest is that of Christ, being like-minded, and that has brought his desires in line with that of Christ. In doing some reading, there was a quote out of one of the books that I was reading, and I wanted to share that with you. When the writer says, "It is best with us when our duty becomes natural to us." Naturally, that is, sincerely and not in pretense only, with a willing heart and upright views. We are apt to prefer our own credit, ease, and safety before truth, holiness, and duty. But Timothy did not so. Genuine. Now, there were some things that Paul pointed out earlier in verses 15 and 17. Turn back with me to Philippians 1. Verses 15 and 17, Paul points out there were some other folks there in and around them that weren't being so genuine. He says, "To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and strife, but others out of goodwill." In verse 17, "The others proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely, seeking to cause me anxiety in my imprisonment." So there are some other brothers that are there, and they see the huge attraction that Paul is gaining from his presenting the gospel. And there's jealousy. There is, "I want that" attitude. And so they were preaching the gospel not for the sake of Christ, not for the sake of others, but for the sake of their own following, their own pocketbooks, if you would call. But not with Timothy. He saw him as genuine. And so for us to be able to effectively serve in the church, we must have that same genuine concern for those around us. We must serve with the interest of Christ and not ourselves. We've got to set aside anything that would cause us to be more concerned about ourselves than our brothers. So being genuine. Having the same mind, being genuine, those are some of the other characteristics. Paul sends out another characteristic we find in verse 22. In verse 22, the verse part, he says, "But you know his proven character." Speaking of Timothy, you know his proven character. The thing that Paul is seeing here is that he has a proven character. A proven character. Paul lets the believers in Philippi know that he has seen the proof. The proof is in the pudding. He says, "I've seen it. I've seen it in Timothy. I've seen his maturity, even from the day that he was young because of his mother and his grandmother, and I've seen it develop even more since then." Paul had confidence even in Timothy back when he sent him to Ephesus. Ephesus had started out as basically a home church. And it grew and it expanded to the point where their ministries were going outside to affect other cities and other countries. And Paul sent Timothy with confidence there. And it was while Timothy was there that Paul had penned a letter to him to provide him with some encouragement, because other folks in Ephesus were dogging him a bit, if you want to call it. Timothy was young. And so in writing it in 1 Timothy 4:12, Paul says, "Let no one despise your youth. Instead, you should be an example to the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." He was encouraging Timothy, don't let them down you because of your physical appearance. Just because you're young, you have what it takes. And I'm reminded of a particular individual, Samuel. Samuel went to seek to anoint the next king. And he went to the sons of Jesse, and he saw this big, strapping young man, muscles beyond, and he says, "This is the one. God, this is the one you want." But guess what? God said this in 1 Samuel 16:7. It says, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And that is an essential component of the proven character by Timothy. Paul has seen his heart, and he understands where it is, and he has so much confidence in Timothy's ability to do the very things that Paul himself would do in ministry. Timothy was going to go anywhere and do anything that Paul asked for him. And it was that type of confidence that Paul had in Timothy. He knew that he could be trusted with the message that Paul had written and was wanting to be sent to the church of Philippi. Not only could he be trusted with that message, but Paul had confidence that Timothy would interact with them, that he would encourage them, that he would strengthen them in the very same fashion that Paul would. And that is the same characteristic that we must have with each other and in the church, knowing that we have the confidence with each other that as we minister to others, that we will minister the same with anyone and everyone. No distinctions. No distinctions. If we are to serve in the church, we must strive to have a proven character, both inside and outside the walls. An important thing, Titus chapter 2. Paul made a notation about the importance of work and ethical integrity. He's talking about outside the church, because his important aspect was that character that would be displayed outside, as he put it, would be an irresistible, attractive aspect by those that he would work with. There's a sad point about church sometimes and believers, that we have this Dr. Jekyll and Hyde mentality. We will live and look like what we're supposed to look like inside these walls. But when we walk outside the walls, for some reason there's this other that comes to life. And it's that character, that lack of consistency, integrity that others see. As I mentioned several weeks ago, Christians are the great advertisers for those seeking Christ. They're also one of the worst advertisers, driving people away from Christ. So it is important that if we are to serve, that we have a proven character. The same mind, genuineness. If we're going to serve in the church, let's look at verse 22, the other part of that. It's where Paul points out another characteristic. It says, but you know his proven character, because he has served with me in the gospel ministry like a son with a father. I want you to try this with me. There is a word in this part of the text. If we were to pull it out, it would change the meaning of the entirety of the text. You want to guess which word that would be? Try it without the word with. Because he has served me in the gospel ministry like a son with a father. Because he has served me. By placing the with in there, it changes the dynamic of what Paul is saying. If we take the with out, now it's all about what Timothy has done for Paul. Paul now becomes of the beneficiary of what Timothy is doing. But with the with, now it becomes a cooperative effort, is a side-by-side ministry opportunity. They're doing it together. Timothy is not a slave to Paul. They are both slaves of Christ, bonded together, working together. And I think that is critical in the ministry of the church. As we serve in the church, is that we serve with each other. Understanding our why, understanding the purpose of what we're doing, understanding the necessity of the genuineness of what we do and the character when we serve with each other. It's almost like we're brothers in arms, which we are fighting a spiritual battle. The whole armor of God, there's a whole other series that I want to do about that. But when we're in the trenches, we are working with each other. We work in tandem, not against. We work to support and encourage each other. And so in ministry, if we are to serve in the church, we must serve with each other. The next one, continuation. There was something else too that Paul mentioned, was that his love. The latter part of that says, he has served with me in the gospel ministry like a son with a father. There is, maybe it's an arguable statement, but there's nothing like a relationship between a father and a son. Particularly when that son, when there's a common interest, when there's something of common nature that you are both involved in. And mothers, you're probably the same thing with maybe a daughter. When there's something that you can work together with and enjoy, that time together is so precious. And the bonds grow even closer. So what Paul and Timothy had been doing, being of that like mind, working closely together to further the gospel throughout the area. They grow so close together as if that relationship of a father and a son. We have to have that same type of relationship with each other, a love relationship. Now remember, sometimes love is not all about emotions. I've been told I can love someone, I may not like them, but I can love them. But there is a common goal of love. Because Christ first loved us, we have the responsibility and the duty to love those around us. And that displays itself in so many different facets. But if we are to successfully serve in the church, we must have a close relationship of love with one another. And again, the idea of serving with each other. It's not a competition. It's not trying to show anyone up. Because again, if we understand our why, then we're focused on the why and not on our self-interests. Anybody know Oswald Chambers? That name ring a bell? I happened to run across one of his devotions talking about ministering. And he says this, and I think I wrote it up here too. He says, ministering as opportunity surrounds us does not mean selecting our surroundings. It means being very selectly God's and in haphazard surroundings which He engineers for us. Sometimes when we serve, we want to be picky. We want to only do what we think we want to do. But I want us to understand the importance, if we truly understand our why. Sometimes we may find ourselves in situations where it may not have been our first choice. But I can tell you some stories of folks who had that attitude. And then over a period of time, they go, I wouldn't have changed my decision. It was the best decision I made. We have opportunities here at this church. God's doing some really neat stuff. I don't know if you've noticed here lately, we've got a few young folks that are coming. I'm hearing a lot of pitter-patters of feet all over the place. God is blessing us. But when God blesses, He provides opportunities for us to serve. Maybe some of those opportunities you're not quite aware of. So I'll tell you what, let me highlight a few for you. Nursery. Guess what? Do we know how many we have in nursery this morning? 7. We've had more than that before, have we not, here lately? Brad, you were back there the other day, weren't you? You came out, your hair was all whacked out, wasn't it? They put you through the test. But you know what? I know you enjoyed it. I know you enjoyed it. They have a rotation of folks that they use back there. But you know what? That list could be longer. That list could be longer because you know what that does? That provides more opportunity for folks to be involved in that ministry, but it also allows those to be able to be participating in worship and Sunday school. Teachers, right now, we need another Sunday school class for our young kids. The room's cleaned out, ready. We've got the teaching material ready. We need a teacher. Because of the whole COVID thing, combined classes out of necessity. But right now we have kindergarten through 6th grade together. That's not ideal. That's not providing them the best learning environment. Because most of you are probably aware of the learning components of when kids start to read and their action. Kindergartens are a completely different level than 6th graders. We need to provide them with the best learning opportunities. We need teachers. Wednesday night, for some reason, things have kind of grown on Sundays and they keep coming back on Wednesdays. So now we have more kids coming. I didn't take it. We had almost 50 total folks here Wednesday. I don't know how many kids did we have here Wednesday. 17, 20-ish. Baptistically, 25, 30. No, just kidding. We had a lot in comparison to where we have been. And I know those numbers are going to get better because the kids know that they're being loved on. The parents enjoy it. Word's going to spread. We need more help with that. On top of that, space is an issue. But you know what? We're going to work with what we have, but I'm going to plant this seed in your heart. There's going to be a time where we're going to have a bigger room. We got to have a bigger house. So I want you to think about that. Where's God going to go with this? Are we open to that possibility? More space. Deacons. I love my deacons. We go to eat every Tuesday. Every Tuesday. But you know what? As the number of folks continue to expand, the more families that come, we're going to need more deacons to help level out some of that responsibility so we can effectively minister to the folks in our church. And giving. Preacher, I knew you'd get there. Guess what? When God blesses, when there are more opportunities for us to reach people, that impacts us financially. It's just a normal thing. I want to think there's a lot of folks that have over the years have given out of their own pocket for things. I appreciate that. But you know what? I want our church to experience the blessing of giving. So because of the resources that we're going to need for more teaching supplies, more student supplies, more ink for the printer. Now you got somebody in the building who just prints away like crazy. Other resources, the food. I think the last business meeting, I know we were, as a 105% of giving versus budget. Was that right about that same? The church has been beyond faithful in their giving based on budget. But the last year and a half, we haven't had a solid budget because we haven't done a lot of ministry because of COVID, understandably. But guess what? That's changing. But what I don't want to change is your faithfulness. That is one way that you can serve with each other, is to give faithfully, to consider where you can serve in the church as a deacon, Wednesday night as a Sunday school teacher in nursery. Matter of fact, I didn't tell Peter this and I didn't tell Denny this, but we're going to lock the doors. No one leaves until we've filled all of our spots. What's that? Musicians, thank you. You see, as God blesses, there will be more opportunities for service. And I know it's a weird phrase, but it's probably an apropos phrase. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. When he calls you, he's going to help you get ready. Now, there's going to be some folks that have some experience that will help, but there are others that, I don't know what to do. Guess what? We'll help you. I'm sure somebody can help you figure out how to hold a baby or fill a cup or help a kid who's crying or help a teacher who needs assistance in a room. But there are opportunities. As our worship team comes this morning, of all the opportunities for us to serve, it still comes down to the why. If we do not have our why down pat, then it won't matter about anything else we do. So it is essential that you know your why. So my question to you this morning, do you know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior? He is the why. He loved us so much that he gave his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for our sins. And what's so key about it, he didn't wait until after we sinned. He knew us before. While we were sinning, he died for us. Do you know Jesus Christ as Lord? Today, I would love to be able to share with you how you can know him personally as Lord and Savior. Maybe this morning, you've been looking for a place where you can call home. I love to have an opportunity to share with you how you can become a member of this church, how you can become part of the family here. Or maybe this morning is your opportunity to say, I've been sitting on the sideline a little bit too long. I kept telling myself that I just don't have what it takes to serve, or I just get in the way. Or maybe part of that is because you're not really solid in your own commitment with Christ. And maybe this is an opportunity for you to rededicate, to recommit yourself to him. Whatever decision that is this morning, can I encourage you to make it without delay? As we all stand and as Cindy and the girls lead us, would you come? Would you come as we sing?